This video is for the inverse trigonometric ratios notes. This is going to be lesson 5.8. So we're going to go through the inverse of sine, the inverse of cosine, and the inverse of tangent. So we're going to start with sine. So the sine of an angle is the ratio of, hang on, let me get this straightened up here. There we go. The opposite side over the hypotenuse. Okay, so in a right triangle, remember the hypotenuse is always the one that doesn't touch the right angle. And then the opposite side is the side that's opposite the angle. So angle A here, BC, would be the opposite leg, would be the leg opposite of angle A. Okay, and so what we can do is we can find the measure of an angle by using these inverse functions. Okay, so it says find the missing angle measure, round to the nearest tenth. So anytime we're doing this in our calculator, make sure that we're checking to make sure, so we do doc 7 and then 2. Make sure we're in degree and not radian. So again, make sure that we're in degree anytime we're using these trig functions. Okay. So let's set this up without the calculator first, and then I'll show you what to do in the calculator. So the sine of angle x is going to be equal to the opposite. So the opposite of x is 40 over the hypotenuse. Okay. So to find x, to find that angle measure, we can do the inverse of sine. That's what that little -1 means, is the inverse. And then 40 over 42. So what that looks like in our calculator. So we would go to these trig functions here, and you can see that we have the inverse of sine. And then we just put that ratio in, or that fraction in, 40 over 42, and it's going to give me the angle measure. And this says round to the nearest tenth. So angle x is about 72.2 degrees. Okay, so now we can do cosine. Okay, so cosine of an angle is the ratio of the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So again, looking at angle A, AC would be the adjacent side. And you can see here the ratios here are set up for you, so you can kind of see, compare the sides and the angles to see where everything goes. Okay, so we're going to find the missing angle measure. So here it is, round to the nearest tenth. So when we're doing this, they're not going to tell us to use sine. They're not going to tell us to use cosine. We have to look at these figures and see what we have. And so 24 is a hypotenuse, and then the 12, in reference to angle x, this is an adjacent side. So we have to look at the pieces that we have. I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse. That means I'm going to use cosine. Okay, so you have to use what you're given to figure out if it's sine, cosine, or tangent. So cosine of x is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and then to find the measure of angle x, we're going to do the inverse of cosine, and then that same ratio. Okay, so back to my trig functions. Inverse of cosine, 12 over 24, and we get x is going to be a 60-degree angle. All right, last one here. So tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So again, they're not going to tell us, they're not going to line these up and say use the inverse of tangent, use the inverse of cosine. They're going to give us a question like this with none of this information that says find the missing angle measure, round to the nearest tenth. So here's my angle. So I label the sides. 38 is an adjacent side, 27 is an opposite side. So if I have opposite and adjacent, I'm going to use tangent. So the tangent of x is going to be opposite over adjacent. And then if I want to find the angle measure, we do the inverse of tangent. Okay. So inverse of tangent, 27 over 38. And again, we're rounding to the tenth. So angle x is about 35.4 degrees. That's what that one would round to. So that's it for this set of notes.